Hollywood's golden age was built on glamour, fame, and larger-than-life personalities. And some of its most famous leading men developed reputations that followed them everywhere. They were charming, confident, constantly surrounded by admirers, and according to biographies, interviews, and stories from people who knew them, some were legendary womanizers. But how much of the mythology was actually true? Today, we're counting down 12 classic Hollywood actors whose romantic lives became almost as famous as their movies. Some reportedly had dozens of relationships, while others made extraordinary claims about hundreds of women. These are the stories behind Hollywood's most notorious legendary womanizers. Errol Flynn. Few names are more closely associated with Hollywood womanizing than Errol Flynn. The Australian-born star became one of Warner Brothers' biggest leading men after exploding onto the screen in adventure films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. Flynn's good looks, confidence, and rebellious personality made him a Hollywood sensation, and his private life became almost as legendary as his career. He was married 3 times, but his reputation for pursuing women extended far beyond his marriages. Flynn himself became associated with outrageous stories about his romantic adventures, and the phrase, "like Flynn," eventually became part of popular culture, meaning someone who had easily succeeded with women. Whether every story told about him was true is impossible to know, but his reputation was enormous. Even today, Errol Flynn remains one of classic Hollywood's most famous symbols of the glamorous, reckless womanizer. Clark Gable. Clark Gable was known as the King of Hollywood, and his personal life matched the image. With his deep voice, confident personality, and unmistakable screen presence, Gable became one of the biggest male stars of the 1930s and 1940s. He was married 5 times, including to actress Carole Lombard, whose death deeply affected him. But before and between those marriages, Gable was linked to numerous women in Hollywood. His charm was considered almost irresistible, and studio publicity often encouraged the image of Gable as the ultimate ladies' man. Some stories surrounding his relationships became Hollywood legend, while others were undoubtedly exaggerated by newspapers and gossip columns. Still, there is little doubt that Gable's reputation as a romantic conqueror was firmly established during his lifetime. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy might seem like an unlikely candidate. He wasn't the stereotypical Hollywood heartthrob, yet his private romantic life was remarkably complicated. Tracy remained legally married to Louise Treadwell for most of his adult life, even though their relationship became distant. His most famous romance was with Katharine Hepburn, a relationship that lasted for decades and became one of Hollywood's greatest love stories. But Tracy's romantic history reportedly included other relationships as well. Unlike some of the men on this list, Tracy wasn't constantly advertising himself as a womanizer. His reputation came more from the number of relationships surrounding him and the extraordinary secrecy of his private life. The public image of the quiet, serious actor concealed a complicated personal world that Hollywood rarely discussed openly. George Raft. George Raft was one of the coolest faces of the gangster era. Known for tough guy roles, sharp suits, and an effortlessly confident attitude, Raft also became famous for his reputation with women. He reportedly had numerous romances throughout his career and moved comfortably among Hollywood stars, socialites, and glamorous women. Raft's personal style became part of his appeal. He wasn't simply playing the mysterious gangster on screen, he seemed to embody that same confidence in real life. Hollywood gossip columns frequently followed his relationships, helping create the image of a man who rarely remained single for long. His career eventually declined, but the legend surrounding his private life continued long after his biggest movies had disappeared from theaters. John Wayne. John Wayne became one of the most recognizable stars in American cinema, though his romantic history was more complicated than his rugged cowboy image suggested. He rose to fame as Hollywood's masculine icon in westerns and war films. Wayne was married 3 times, to Josephine Saenz, Esperanza Bauer, and Pilar Palit, and had 7 children, but was frequently linked to other women. His relationships and rumored affairs with actresses were a recurring subject of Hollywood gossip columns. Co-stars like Marlene Dietrich were mentioned in speculation, while his chemistry with Maureen O'Hara fueled public curiosity. Wayne's image as an ultramasculine leading man made the stories even more believable to audiences. Yet people close to him described a more complex, disciplined, and sometimes contradictory personality behind the public image. Whatever the exact number of his relationships, his reputation as a ladies' man became inseparable from John Wayne legend. Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper represented a different kind of Hollywood charm. Tall, understated, and seemingly effortless, he became one of the era's biggest stars. His quiet confidence attracted enormous attention from women, and biographies have documented several romantic relationships during his career. Cooper was married to Veronica "Rocky" Cooper for decades, but his personal life reportedly included affairs and relationships with other women. His reputation became particularly associated with glamorous actresses and women from Hollywood's social circles. Unlike some stars who openly celebrated their womanizing image, Cooper generally kept his private life away from the spotlight. That secrecy only made the stories surrounding him more intriguing. Friends and industry insiders often described him as reserved in public but unexpectedly magnetic in private settings, which only fueled speculation. Over time, his image as the stoic Western hero contrasted sharply with whispers of a more complicated romantic life behind closed doors. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra was not only one of America's greatest singers, he was also one of the most famous celebrity personalities of the 20th century. Rising from Hoboken to global stardom, he became the voice of the Rat Pack era and a symbol of mid-century cool. His romantic history included marriages to Nancy Barbato, Ava Gardner, Mia Farrow, and Barbara Marx, along with numerous reported relationships with actresses, models, and socialites. Sinatra's charisma, fame, wealth, and powerful industry connections made him one of the most sought-after men in entertainment. Women were constantly part of the Sinatra story, and the press closely followed his romances, often blurring fact and rumor. His relationship with Ava Gardner became especially famous, marked by intense passion, jealousy, breakups, and reconciliations that captivated Hollywood. Sinatra's reputation as a ladies' man eventually became inseparable from his public identity. He didn't just sing about complicated romance, his own turbulent love life provided endless material for headlines and legend. Gene Kelly. Gene Kelly became famous for transforming dance and movement into cinematic spectacle. But away from the cameras, his personal life also attracted attention. Kelly was married 3 times, to Betsy Blair, Jean Coyne, and Patricia Ward, and was known for his charm, discipline, and quiet confidence. During Hollywood's studio era, leading men with athletic talent and refined charisma often drew intense admiration, and Kelly was no exception. His combination of athletic build, precision dancing, and approachable personality made him a major heartthrob for audiences and colleagues alike. While he generally maintained a more private reputation than some contemporaries, stories of flirtations and close relationships circulated within Hollywood circles, though many were never confirmed publicly. What is clear is that Kelly's fame, artistry, and magnetic presence placed him among the most admired and desirable leading men of his generation, both on screen and in the social world of classic Hollywood era. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was one of the great romantic idols of classic Hollywood. Fox promoted him as a sophisticated, handsome leading man, and audiences responded immediately. His career included romantic dramas, adventures, and swashbuckling roles, but his real-life image was almost equally glamorous. Power married 3 times and was linked to several women during his years as a major star. His charm reportedly extended far beyond the movie screen. Women admired him, Hollywood photographers followed him, and gossip columns regularly covered his personal life. Power's reputation wasn't built on crude behavior but on the image of the irresistible movie star who seemed to have romance following him wherever he went. He was often described as effortlessly elegant, with a quiet confidence that made him stand out even among Hollywood's elite. Friends and co-stars noted that he was polite, attentive, and naturally magnetic, which only fueled his reputation as a true screen-era heartthrob. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando changed Hollywood acting forever with his intense performances and rebellious personality. But his private life became just as legendary as his career. Brando was married 3 times and had a large family, while biographies and interviews have described numerous romantic relationships throughout his life. Brando himself spoke openly at different times about his attraction to both women and men, making his personal history considerably more complicated than the traditional Hollywood womanizer stereotype. His fame, extraordinary looks, and unpredictable personality made him one of the most desired actors of his generation. Stories about Brando's romantic adventures eventually became part of the larger mythology surrounding one of cinema's most enigmatic stars. Charlie Chaplin. At number 1 is one of the most surprising names on the list, Charlie Chaplin. To millions of people, Chaplin was the little tramp, the funny man with the bowler hat and tiny mustache who could make audiences laugh without saying a word. Behind that comic image, however, was an extraordinarily complicated personal life. Chaplin married 4 times, and several of his relationships became major public controversies. His first 3 marriages were to very young women, and his relationships frequently generated enormous press attention. Chaplin's romantic life was so controversial that it sometimes threatened to overshadow his achievements as a filmmaker. His reputation became a strange contradiction. The world's beloved silent film comedian was also one of Hollywood's most controversial private figures. These 12 men show just how different the reality behind Hollywood's legendary ladies' men could be. Some were genuinely prolific romantics, some had reputations exaggerated by gossip columns, and some became victims of stories that were impossible to verify decades later. In the Golden Age, celebrity privacy barely existed, and a famous actor's romantic life could become entertainment for millions. The important thing is to separate documented relationships from rumors and extraordinary claims that may have grown with every retelling.